The desert sun dipped low, casting long shadows over cracked, sun-baked earth. Nayeli stumbled across the dry plain, her bare feet kicking up dust with every uncertain step. The wind whispered through the sparse sagebrush, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and distant pine. Her heart pounded, not from exertion, but from the cold, gnawing fear of being utterly alone. Her tribe had left her here, a cruel decision born of politics she barely understood. And now the endless prairie seemed to stretch like a prison in all directions. A low, guttural howl echoed from the jagged hills to the east. Nayeli froze, eyes darting. Shadows moved among the rocks, wolves, their eyes glinting like embers in the dying light. Her fingers dug into the dry soil, grounding herself as the pack circled closer, teeth bared and fur bristling. She could feel the tension vibrating through her chest, a mixture of terror and defiance. "I will not die here," she whispered to herself, but the words barely carried over the wind. Then a sudden blur appeared on the horizon, a cloud of dust rising like a living thing. A horse's hooves thundered, and before the wolves could advance, a man rode out of the fading sun, a tall, broad-shouldered cowboy with a leather duster flapping against the evening wind. In his hand, the butt of a rifle swung with casual precision. "Back off!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the desert, firm and commanding. The wolves paused, ears twitching, growls rumbling through the canyon walls. With a swift crack of the rifle and a kick of his spurs, he sent them scattering into the brush. Nayeli let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her legs trembling as she sank to the ground. The cowboy slid from his horse, boots sinking into the sand, and offered her a hand. His eyes, a pale, stormy blue, studied her face with a mixture of caution and curiosity. "You all right?" he asked, voice softening, yet still carrying the edge of danger that made him seem untouchable. I think so," Nayeli stammered, brushing the dust from her tattered skirt. Her heart thudded in her chest, not just from relief, but from something unfamiliar, something stirring beneath her fear. "Name's Cole," he said, giving her a nod. "You can't survive out here alone, not at dusk, not with those wolves sniffing around." Nayeli's gaze flicked to the horizon, where the last rays of the sun set the sky ablaze in crimson and gold. I was abandoned," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. Cole's jaw tightened, but his hand remained steady, still offering her support. "Then I reckon you've got luck on your side tonight. Come on, you can ride with me." As she swung onto his horse behind him, their bodies pressed together for balance. Nayeli felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert sun. The wind whipped past them, carrying the scent of sage and leather, the distant call of coyotes echoing through the canyon. In that moment, amidst danger and uncertainty, a fragile spark of trust, and something far more tender, flickered between them. The prairie stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving, but for the first time since being left for dead, Nayeli felt she was not completely alone. The town of Redstone was a collection of weathered buildings and creaking wooden sidewalks, dust swirling endlessly around the saloon doors, as if the desert itself refused to let go. Cole led Nayeli down the main street, the late afternoon sun casting their long shadows behind them. Horses stamped in the hitching posts, spurs jingling with impatient riders, while the faint clatter of a blacksmith hammering echoed from the far end of town. "Stay close," Cole murmured, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting second, a subtle anchor in a world that felt suddenly hostile. Nayeli's eyes scanned the faces in the crowd, some curious, some openly hostile, others indifferent, but all seemed to carry the weight of suspicion. Her heart quickened, each glance like a reminder that outsiders weren't welcome here, especially not an Apache woman walking beside a gunslinger. The saloon loomed ahead, its swinging doors groaning as they moved. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, the scent of whiskey and stale sweat clinging to the wooden beams. A piano tinkled out a half-forgotten melody in the corner, while cowboys laughed and spat on the floor, dice clattering across the tables. Nayeli's gaze darted to the shadow corners, wary of whispers and pointed fingers. Cole slid the doors open wider, letting her step through first. "Don't mind him," he said, his voice low, almost protective. "They don't know better." A few heads turned, and the chatter dimmed slightly. One man's gaze lingered a second too long, a sneer curling his lips. Nayeli felt her stomach tighten, the old, familiar fear prickling her skin. Yet, as Cole led her to a quiet corner table, she noticed a subtle way he moved, how he subtly blocked her from the harshest stares, how his presence felt like a shield against the world. They settled onto the worn bench, the leather cracked and stiff under their weight. Cole's eyes, stormy and watchful, studied her as she sank into herself, trying to seem smaller, less noticeable. "Name's Nayeli," she said softly, finally daring to meet his gaze. He gave a small nod, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "You've got spirit, even if you don't see it. Not many would have survived those wolves." Nayeli's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles, the warmth of his words sinking into her like the last light of a dying sunset. "I didn't expect anyone to come," she admitted. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her skirt, nervous yet curious about the man who had risked himself for her. Cole leaned back, listening to the murmurs and clinking glasses around them, before whispering, "Ain't no reason for you to face this world alone. Not when there's someone willing to stand by you." His gaze lingered, searching hers for a spark of trust. For a moment, Nayeli allowed herself to imagine something beyond survival, a life where the desert wind was less frightening because someone was at her side. The saloon noises faded into a blur of smoke, laughter, and piano keys, and in the dim, dusty light, she felt the first fragile flicker of something dangerous and thrilling. Hope. The sky above the prairie darkened suddenly, clouds rolling in like a warning from some unseen force. Cole urged his horse forward, hooves pounding against the dusty earth as Nayeli clung to him, the wind tugging at her hair and the edges of her tattered shawl. Lightning split the horizon, illuminating the jagged ridges of distant mesas, and the first fat drops of rain began to fall, mingling with the dust to form a gritty paste on their skin. "Hold tight," Cole shouted over the roar of wind, the storm already howling around them like a living thing. Nayeli gripped his waist, knuckles white, heart hammering as the horse stumbled through slick, uneven ground. Every step was a battle. Every gust threatened to throw them off balance. Yet through it all, Cole's presence was a steady anchor, a shield against both the storm and the terror that clutched at her chest. A sudden crack of thunder made Nayeli flinch, and her breath caught in her throat. The horse skidded near a swollen river, water surging against its banks. "We have to cross," Cole yelled, his eyes fierce but steady. Nayeli's heart pounded. The river looked more like a wall than a path. As they plunged into the current, water splashing over her knees, Cole wrapped one arm tightly around her, keeping her pressed close. "You're going to be all right," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "I've got you." Her pulse raced for more than the river's danger. Pressed against him, feeling the taut strength of his chest and the warmth of his hand securing her, something stirred deep within her, a thrilling, forbidden closeness that made her cheeks burn. She dared a glance at his face, rain plastering dark strands of hair across his forehead, eyes stormy and focused, yet softened by the concern he showed only for her. They made it across, splashing onto the opposite bank, soaked to bone but alive. Cole dismounted and helped Nayeli to her feet, brushing mud from her shoulders. "You handled yourself well," he said, a faint grin breaking through the intensity. Nayeli could only laugh nervously, the sound blending with the rumble of distant thunder. That night, as they huddled under the scant shelter of a rocky overhang, the storm still raging around them, they shared stories to keep fear at bay. Nayeli spoke of her childhood on the open plains, of her people's traditions and the betrayal that had left her stranded. Cole told tales of the frontier, of cattle drives, gunfights, and nights alone under a vast, unfeeling sky. The firelight flickered across their faces, illuminating a connection neither had expected. The wind shrieked outside, but inside their small shelter there was warmth, laughter, and something more, an unspoken bond born from shared danger and quiet understanding. Nayeli, who had feared loneliness more than anything, realized that for the first time since the desert, she could trust another human being. As they lay back, eyes catching the first glimpses of stars piercing the storm clouds, Nayeli felt a shiver that wasn't from cold. Somewhere between fear and safety, danger and survival, she sensed the beginnings of something wild, irresistible, and entirely unexpected: love. The canyon's edge was alive with the low hum of tension. Dust swirled in the wind, carrying the metallic scent of danger, and the sun burned a harsh orange over the jagged rocks. Cole and Nayeli crouched behind a boulder, eyes locked on the group approaching from the other side. A mix of rival Apache warriors and a band of ruthless outlaws hired by a greedy landowner. Every step they took kicked up clouds of dust, every creak of leather and clink of spurs echoing across the canyon, like a drumbeat of impending conflict. "We can't outrun them," Cole muttered, checking the chambers of his revolvers with steady fingers. His gaze flicked to Nayeli, whose jaw was set, her hands tightening around the bow she had insisted on carrying. "But we can make them regret underestimating us." Nayeli's heart thudded, a mixture of fear and adrenaline. The betrayal that had left her for dead had carved a scar in her soul, but now, standing beside Cole, she felt the steel of her resolve. "I'm not afraid," she said quietly, eyes burning. "Not anymore." The first shot rang out, sharp and echoing, cutting through the canyon stillness. Cole rolled to the side, firing back with precision, the revolver's recoil jerking his arm but not his aim. Nayeli loosed an arrow, its swift flight finding its mark in the saddle of a mounted outlaw, who yelped and tumbled into the dust. The clash of gunfire and the whinnying of horses filled the air, punctuated by the distant call of a circling crow. Amid the chaos, Cole moved like a force of nature, protecting Nayeli, covering her as she fired again, her confidence growing with each successful shot. Dust clung to their skin, sweat mingling with dirt, and for brief moments their eyes met across the gunfire, silent words of trust and unspoken longing passing between them. Nayeli realized she had never felt more alive, more connected to another human being, than in this violent, unforgiving moment. A rival Apache stepped forward, recognizing Nayeli. "You betray us," he shouted, rushing her. Cole was at her side instantly, fists and revolvers defending her as she ducked, her arrows slicing through the air. Heart pounding, Nayeli met her attacker's gaze and, with a deep breath, found the courage to fight, not just survive, but to stand for herself. By the time the dust settled, bodies sprawled across the canyon floor, the remaining enemies retreating into shadows. Cole and Nayeli stood side by side, breathless and bruised. The golden light of late afternoon bathed them in warmth, contrasting sharply with the blood and dirt of the fight. Cole's hand brushed hers, tentatively, but with a gravity that made Nayeli's chest ache. "You were incredible," he said softly, voice rough with emotion and exhaustion. "And you," she replied, her fingers lingering on his, "save me again." For a moment, the canyon was silent except for the whispering wind, carrying with it the promise of a fragile peace. Among the dust, the blood, and the danger, their bond had solidified, not just as allies, but as something more, something neither of them could deny any longer. The morning sun spilled over the mesas, painting the desert in brilliant golds and deep shadows. The storm from days past had passed, leaving the air crisp and clean, scented with sage and wet earth. Cole and Nayeli rode slowly along the ridge, surveying the land that had once seemed so dangerous, so unreachable. Now it felt alive, vibrant, and filled with the possibility of new beginnings. Nayeli's eyes softened as she watched the sunrise, her fingers tracing the worn leather of the saddle. "It's beautiful," she whispered, the wind tugging at her dark hair. "My people, they call this land sacred. I never thought I'd see it again, and now I'm not alone." Cole glanced at her, a small, proud smile tugging at his lips. "You've earned this," he said, voice low. "You've survived more than most, and now you've got someone by your side who won't let you face it alone." As they rode into the valley, the distant sounds of a small Apache encampment reached their ears. Laughter, children's voices, and the rhythmic pounding of hammers on a blacksmith's forge. Nayeli's family emerged cautiously from the tents, eyes wide at the sight of Cole riding with her. Murmurs and whispers spread like wildfire through the camp. Some were skeptical, others curious, but Nayeli stepped forward with confidence, her hand still resting lightly on Cole's arm. "This is Cole," she announced, voice steady and unwavering. "He saved me. He stood by me when no one else would, and he's come to help protect our land." Her father, tall and imposing, studied Cole with a mix of suspicion and respect. After a tense moment, he nodded slowly. "If he's truly brave and true, then perhaps we can trust him," he said. Nayeli exhaled quietly, relief and pride washing over her in equal measure. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Cole and Nayeli worked side by side, reinforcing fences, tending horses, and repairing the small homestead. The quiet labor was intimate and grounding, each brush of hands and shared glance carrying unspoken promises. Nayeli laughed freely, the sound ringing through the high desert, blending with the distant howl of coyotes and the soft clinking of spurs. As twilight settled, Cole and Nayeli stood together on a ridge, the wind tugging at their coats, the desert stretching endlessly below them. Cole took her hand gently, fingers intertwining with hers. "I reckon this is where we belong," he murmured, eyes reflecting the last amber rays of the sun. Nayeli leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "With you," she said softly, "I feel like I can finally breathe and be free." The wind carried their laughter, their whispered promises, and the quiet rhythm of hearts finding one another. In the vast, unforgiving desert, amid dust, danger, and endless horizons, they had forged something unbreakable: trust, love, and the beginning of a life together. And as the stars blinked into existence above them, the high desert seemed to hold its breath, honoring the unlikely alliance that had become a bond stronger than the land itself. The sun hung low over the endless plains, painting the sky in streaks of fire and gold, while the wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth. Horses grazed quietly near the edge of the canyon, their soft nickers and the clinking of spurs from the nearby ranch blending with the distant strains of piano music from the town saloon. Cole and Nayeli stood atop a rocky rise, the desert stretching endlessly before them, the land now safe and alive beneath their feet. Nayeli rested her hand on Cole's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. Dust clung to their clothes, and the smell of sweat and sage filled the air, but neither cared. After all the danger, the betrayal, the storms and gunfire, they had survived. Together. Cole tipped his hat back, his stormy eyes softening as they met hers. "I reckon this land brought us together," he said, voice low and steady. "But it's you I'm going to stay with, no matter what comes next." Tears glittered in Nayeli's eyes as she smiled, brushing a strand of wind-tossed hair from her face. "Then we'll face it all, side by side," she whispered, her voice carrying across the canyon like a promise. Cole lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, then pulled her close. The sun dipped behind the mesas, casting long, golden shadows that merged them into a single silhouette against the vast, dusty horizon. The wind tugged at their coats and hair. The plain stretched wide and free, and for the first time, The future felt boundless. In that quiet, sun-soaked moment, the desert held its breath, honoring their love, their courage, and the journey that had brought two unlikely souls together.